Hi everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here, taking a look at the Gulfstream Park Sprint Stakes on Saturday at Gulfstream. This one is race 9 on the Gulfstream Saturday card, going 6 furlongs for older horses on the main track. And Craig, we've got a field of 7 signed on, and I would say for a listed stakes race in the sprint division, this one drew a pretty interesting field. I think this handicaps as an intriguing race.
It is a good race. This could easily be a grade 3 race. There's some good solid horses in here. Some have run some really nice speed figures. So this was a good one for me.
You see the morning line favorite drawn to the outside is the number 7 Candyman Rocket. That one definitely has had an affinity for Gulfstream Park, so we'll talk about him a little bit later in our preview. But before we get to the main contenders, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this race. And Craig, I was a little bit surprised to not see the fast pace flag showing up in this race because there is quite a bit of speed signed on. I know that certain thresholds have to be met when it's just a field of 7 runners for that fast pace flag to show up in a sprint race on the dirt. But it does feel like there are quite a few horses that want to be forwardly placed in here.
I'd agree with you. I'm treating this as a race I expect a fast pace. This one was right on the borderline of getting that tag. The only thing that kept it from getting it was the fact that Super Ocho has a 9-point edge over the second horse in the early speed ratings. Otherwise, it would have had it. Now, I do expect it to be pretty hot on the front end.
And also, before we get into those contenders, we'll take a look at one of the new features in Timeform US. That is the Finish Projector. You can currently access the Finish Projector by accessing Timeform US from your DRF mobile PPs, just tapping on that Timeform US tab and toggling over from the Pace Projector. And Craig, this is the Timeform US algorithm, a visual representation of the power picks that people might be familiar with from the classic version of Timeform US. So major emphasis placed on the speed figures in this Finish Projector. So not a big surprise to see the number 6 Lightning Larry shown as the winner of this race. He's coming off the highest last out speed figure of anybody, but I think that's one that we're going to have some discussions about when we get to Lightning Larry.
Yeah, it makes sense that he's shown in front. He ran that big 124 last time. He's also run a 120 in the past. So the algorithm picks him as the fastest horse. We'll see if you and I pick him as well.
Well, let's start with Lightning Larry as we dive into the contenders, and we'll take a look at that very fast speed figure that he earned last time out in the Sunshine Sprint. This race restricted to Florida breds. He went off as the slight 5-2 favorite on this day, but they didn't make it easy on him, Craig. He got hounded early, took pressure from both sides of the top of the stretch, and this horse just kept finding more at every stage of this race. You could see he's really finishing powerfully across the line. Also take note of the number 7 in this race, Magic, who was closing for second. He made a nice run from the back of the pack to get up for the place spot. But Lightning Larry, Craig, I think the big question with him is how much stock can we put in that speed figure last time out? Because I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. I think that must have been a difficult day to make speed figures. I see that it has the B notation next to the race rating, indicating that this was a breakout race. And when I went to look back at it, I think that there were only 3 dirt races on this Gulfstream card, and 2 of them were going 6 furlongs and a mile, but both maiden races for 3-year-olds. So difficult day to make those comparisons. And I think if people played it straight making the speed figures, this number would have come back a lot lower.
Yeah, these are tough. I didn't actually make this card. My assistant's been doing a lot of Gulfstream, but I certainly gave it a long look, and I agreed with his call in here. There's actually only been 1 horse to run back. That was the 3rd place finisher, Gatsby, and he's actually improved his speed figure 6 points next time out. So I think the number is legit. It's one of those deals with all the turf races and synthetic races. The dirt track gets worked on quite a bit. You see, we give you that B for a breakout, a notation to let you know it might not be the most solid speed figure we're ever going to make, but I do think it was a strong race. My one issue with Lightning Larry is he's a horse who, though the pace was strong, you see the 130 speed figure, it was contested. He's a horse that does his best running when he is alone on the front end, and he's got to get to the front. And I think it's a major question if he's going to be able to do that in this spot or not.
Yeah, I agree with your call on making the higher speed figure for that race. I think that 124 is much closer to where it feels like he ran, just based on some of the other horses in this race. And just for what it's worth, we should mention this horse did get an 87 Beyer for that race. I think Beyer just grouped all the dirt races together. It's hard to know which one is the right call when there is so little evidence to go on, only running those 3 dirt races at Gulfstream Park. But just something to be aware of, because I know that both those speed figures tend to generate the way the public plays these races. So this horse coming in with a very fast number on the Timeform US scale. The other horse coming out of that Sunshine Sprint is the number 4, Cajun's Magic. And I guess the big positive with him, Craig, is there's a lot of speed signed on, and he is one of the few horses in this race that has shown the ability to pass horses. Actually did it last time when he made that big run from last place to get up into second.
Yeah, it was a career best race. He was coming off a fairly long layoff. You can see the red line in his PPs. That 115 speed figure looks like a big jump up, but he is a 4-year-old. We hadn't seen him since early in his 3-year-old season. He had shown some potential before going to the sideline. So I liked what I saw from him. I also like that as a closer, he's going to get pace, but there's also the additional value for him that it's not a huge field. There's only 7 horses entered. So it's not like he's going to have to navigate through a lot of traffic and maybe getting trapped in. He should be able to get a good clear run, and if he's good enough, he can get there.
Yeah, at first glance, that figure last time out looked like more of an outlier, but when I started to dig into this horse's PPs more, it started to make some sense. He actually ran pretty well in some tough spots last year, particularly when they tried that Holy Bull, when they briefly put him on the Derby Trail. He was right in the mix until the final eighth of a mile that day, going a distance that's simply too far for him against horses like White Abarrio, Simplification, Mo Donegal. He had shown some quality early in his career, and obviously something went wrong that necessitated the layoff following that race back in May. But coming off the layoff last time, a big effort for him, and he is supposed to get the right kind of pace set up in this race. Let's move on to the horse that was pegged as the morning line favorite. That is the number 7, Candyman Rocket. And we'll check out his last race at Gulfstream Park. And Craig, this was a pretty impressive effort. The problem with Candyman Rocket is we get to see him so infrequently. This was his second start in the past year, but his prior race had come almost a year ago at Gulfstream Park, and prior to that, he was coming off another layoff of about 9 months. So we haven't seen him on the racetrack too much, but the last couple of times that we have seen him at Gulfstream, he's been an impressive winner.
Yeah, he's a horse who is a very good sprinter, obviously. His couple times he tried a route, he did well in the Sam Davis. It was a race that set up nice for him. The other 2 didn't go so well. I think he's really been a sprinter all along. You do have to worry about the layoff. He's typically a horse I would worry about a bounce, running a big figure off of the layoff like he did. But it wasn't really a very hard race on him. He did things easy. He wasn't really challenged all through the stretch, pulling away from Paco Chico that day. So I think he's a strong contender, and he draws well on the outside, given that he is a horse who has speed but doesn't have to have the lead.
Yeah, I think the outside draw could be particularly helpful to this horse because he's not one that I would want to see covered up in behind horses. He doesn't strike me as the kind of horse that can handle that sort of adversity. He's a free running sort. He can get a little keen in his races. So I think they want to keep him outside of the kickback and get that clear run into the race. I'm just a little bit concerned that he could have to come off the bridle earlier than he really wants to, given the likelihood of a fast pace in this spot. Let's move on to another horse that's actually drawn on the other side of the starting gate, the number 1, Scaramouche, who's breaking from the rail. And we'll check out his race at the Gallant Bob, going back 3 back at Parks. This was his last victory when he beat a decent field of 3-year-olds. Included in this race was actually Lightning Larry, who's just to his inside, as Scaramouche starts to pull away from that rival and all the others here. Since then, Craig, he hasn't been able to win, but he ran just fine in his most recent dirt start, and I'm not sure why the Connections decided to try the turf last time, but I think he's getting back on the right surface here.
I'd agree. No problem with him taking a shot on the turf. I mean, he was in good form, but he didn't handle it that day. The race was probably way too short for him, but his race at Mahoning Valley was fine. I think he's still in good form. Normally, I would be a little concerned about the rail draw, but I don't think he's a horse that wants to be up contesting the pace. He's more of a mid-pack type runner. So he should get a good trip from inside. For me, it's just a question of is he fast enough, because there are some really quick horses in here who have run better speed figures.
Yeah, he's a horse that I would like more if he had drawn an outside post position, because while he has rated just off the pace before, he's not really a horse that's dealt with kickback, and that can be an issue at Gulfstream Park. When he won that Gallant Bob, the Grade 2 event from just off the pace, he was drawn in the far outside post position in a 13-horse field. Now he's drawn the rail, so probably going to work out a different kind of trip on Saturday down in Florida. Let's move on to a horse that's coming from a venue that we don't often talk about in our stakes previews, Craig, and that's the number 2 Super Ocho, who last ran in an allowance race at Delta Downs. And actually, his last couple of starts have come at Delta Downs. This is a horse that's really been making the travels all over the country. He was out in California. He went to Keeneland for the Breeders' Cup. He actually made his U.S. debut at Mountaineer in West Virginia. So he's taken a tour of the U.S., and now his travels have taken him down to Florida. This is a horse that is pretty good on his best day, and one that figures to be mixing it up on the front end.
Yeah, he's the one that I think is the biggest problem for Larry the Legend. He's a horse who's just very fast. You can see it in his pace figures. I mean, this horse led the Breeders' Cup Sprint through a half mile, and with a furlong to go was just a head back before some others passed him. So I do wonder if the 6 furlongs is ideal for him. We see he got beat by the old veteran Empire of Gold, who's a very fast horse in his own right at 5 furlongs. Wasn't much competition in that last one. So he's running good speed figures. I do think he'll be on the front end in here. I just worry about that last furlong, given that he's going to have to probably face some pressure sooner rather than later.
Another runner that is visiting Florida for the winter is the number 5, Uncle Ernie. This is a Parks-based 5-year-old who has achieved most of his success at that Pennsylvania venue. He did race at Gulfstream last time, going 7 furlongs in the Mr. Prospector Stakes. He set a fast pace, Craig, was no match for Sibelius, who is just a better horse than these. Faded a little bit at the end, but he's another horse that could have a tough time dealing with other speed in the race.
Exactly. He's run good speed figures, as you can see in his time form USPPs, 118 the last couple times. He does have high speed. Again, I have a problem seeing him outrun Super Ocho early, and I think that could spell problems for him.
And then finally, we'll discuss the outsider in the field, the number 3, Doc Amster. This is a horse that has shown quality at different points in his career. He actually was 5th in the Grade 1 AG Vanderbilt last summer behind Jackie's Warrior, though that was a pretty small field and not the toughest Grade 1 that you'll ever see. He had a trainer switch coming into this season at Gulfstream Park, Craig, and didn't run well for the new barn last time with a tough start in the Hooper, and just feels like he's got a lot to prove at this stage of his career.
Right. I might be a little more optimistic if it weren't for that trainer switch. I don't know what necessitated it, but he definitely moved to lower connection barns. They have low win percentage, didn't run a step in that Hooper. So he's not for me in here, even at those odds, which look pretty inviting because he does have back races that maybe could compete a little bit, but I just don't see it off that Hooper.
Well, we've gone through all the contenders, so let's throw out the picks for Craig and I in the Gulfstream Park Sprint. And we've got some similar ideas here, Craig, but we're going to diverge with our top picks. You're going for the number 7 Candyman Rocket. It's been a pretty good move to take Bill Mott in stakes races recently. He's had some pretty good horses running out of his barn, and he seems like he might have another one here with Candyman Rocket if he can finally stay on the racetrack.
Yeah, I remember the old days when Bill Mott was known as a turf guy. He's become the sprint guy now. I will admit I made these picks before I saw the morning line. I don't think Candyman Rocket's going to offer much value. I do think he's the most likely winner given that good outside draw. But as you can see, your horse is much more inviting odds, and Cajun's Magic, I have him pick second.
Yeah, I went for the price on top, the number 4, Cajun's Magic. He's going to need a lot of things to go his way, but it feels like that could happen with so much speed drawn in the field. He does need the pace to collapse, but that feels like it is a very real possibility in this race. And I think both he and the number 6, Lightning Larry, there's the potential they could be somewhat underrated by the bettors just based on the differences in speed figures for the last race. I believe the big number that Craig gave that Sunshine Sprint and Cajun's Magic definitely fits off that last figure on from Timeform US. So that's a look at the Gulfstream Park Sprint on Saturday at Gulfstream Park. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.